Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Cthulhu War summary and review and unboxing and general insanity. Now to the left here, this bit here, this is the box with the lid over on the right, and you'll notice there's lots of little text on here, and this is the name of all the backers of the original Kickstarter. Now my understanding is Sandy released Cthulhu Wars on Kickstarter as a bit of a swan song, and he thought it'd be a kind of a one and done product, but it was been so successful that he's branched out into making other board games and done a second Kickstarter known as Onslaught 2. There is talk of Onslaught 3, and basically most of the Onslaught 2 stuff is arriving in Europe and has been in America for a while. So I'm going to actually look at the base game, which I didn't Kickstarter originally because 1, it was expensive, 2, the map to me looked ugly as sin, and 3, at the time I frankly didn't really have the money. But once the reviews started coming in, I realised it was Chaos in the Old World style of game without the problems that I have with Chaos in the Old World. So I really like the game. But it's not perfect. It does have problems. One of the big problems being it's just rather large because Sandy went with a 28mm super deluxe concept. So let's have a look inside the box, which has a nice little cutout here so you can get things out. Comes with a nice baggie. A little bit of a pet peeve of mine. It comes with a lovely map, but doesn't actually really fit the box, so that's annoying to me. That's rather large, so we won't open it up just yet. It's also 2 bits, by the way, so you've got part 1 and part 2. Ooh, get those scissors out of the way. There is a a sales pamphlet of all the other bits you can buy, which I now have done. The Doom track to me is a little bit disappointing. I have got some new ones in Onslaught 2, which are a slight improvement on these. You've also got the rather underwhelming ritual tracks. You've got several of those. Get those all out of the way. You've got your kind of old ones. Again, these have been updated as part of the Kickstarter, and obviously you get 1 for each old one. The original rulebook, which is basically replaced now by the Omega rulebook, which is available as a free PDF, by the way. Couple of cards to summarise bits and pieces. Then when you get underneath this, you get to one of the main appeals of Cthulhu Wars, which are the miniatures. And it comes with this rather fancy plastic container to hold the old ones. And it does a pretty good job. The problem is it doesn't do a very good job at looking after all the other miniatures, which are actually just chucked in a baggie underneath this. Also, there was a problem where some of these broke. My one, thankfully, seems to be pretty robust. You've got Cthulhu himself, rather large, imposing figure, and these paint up really well. You might need to do hot water tricks on bending bits into place. You've got Nyarlathotep, rather swish looking thing, and of course I'm going to have trouble one-handed putting this back in. wgah'nagl, there she is in all her tentacly goodness, and she has a couple of giant walking trees. There's actually 3 of them in total. Then you have the king in yellow, which is a nice figure, although there is a risk of it bending, so watch out for that. And then when he transforms into Hastor, this giant squiggly thing, and that's really cool miniatures. And you know, the reason I actually bought the game when I finally got the money is I worked out just for the miniatures alone the game was worth it, and you know, that's definitely worth a thing. But anyway, let's get this tray out and look at the stuff underneath. Okay, well, I've slightly changed up how I've boxed the bag away. So I've got each faction in its own bag with a starting gate, the spell cards, and obviously the miniatures. I've also got a big bag full of these like turn markers and stuff. I also happened to buy some 3D point tokens, which I've painted up, and these are really, really good. These are well worth buying. I forget your name. I'm afraid I want to say it's Rules, but I wouldn't quote me on that. And he's the same guy who produced this little turn marker thing as well. So anyway, let's have a look at each faction in turn. Okay, before we get into the actual main game, as I mentioned, these are 3D printed objects that don't come with the game. I think they're a well worthwhile upgrade. Now, if you bought the Onslaught 2 Kickstarter pack, you could have got the trapezoid pack, which comes with equivalents to these. I actually prefer these ones. So you've got 1 point token, 2 point, and 3 point, and he's gone with the elder sign in the sort of kind of leafy pattern. Which of course is a bit of a debate amongst Cthulhu fans as to whether it should be the trapezoid or the kind of fig leaf thing. As you can see, paints up really well, a little bit of green to make it show up. Now, there is a problem with people. If they really want to cheat, they can sort of do a little bit of feeling. If that's a concern, I guess you could like silicon seal so it's all flat. I play with people who are not douchebags, so that's not really a big problem. So anyway, these, as I say, are not part of the retail box, but I did want to show you these because I feel they're a worthwhile upgrade and definitely enhance the game to me. They feel nice, they sound decent, and they paint up really, really well. With regard to painting these, by the way, I flat sprayed them with a spray can. I then did a wash, then a quick dry brush, and then painted that in green, and it painted up really, really quick. So anyway, let's put those to one side and get back to the main game contents. Okay, so here we're looking at Nyarlathotep. So you've got his marker and his spell cards. I've chucked in a gate. Now these can be replaced with 3D gates, which I'll be looking at when I look at the rest of the Kickstarter. These are perfectly adequate. The 3D gates look great. They are a little bit of pain to store and put on the board, etc. But you know, these are perfectly serviceable. And this is a 28mm figure of a priest or a cultist. Now, in the world of Cthulhu Wars, what's actually happened is the great old ones have awoken and taken over the earth, and most people have actually fallen into basically complying with Cthulhu. Now, there is a game end condition whereby humanity does finally defeat the old ones, but I believe in so doing they destroy the earth. So obviously, in Cthulhu Wars, you are an old one trying to become, you know, dominant over Earth, and you're aided by your little cultists. Now you can update them. If I remember correctly, were these hunting horrors? So that's one of the upgrades. Then I think these Ninth Courts or Bikes. Unfortunately, names escape me right now. And then these chaps as well. I'm probably going to have to look up what they are. I can't remember what the names are now. It's terrible. So they are basically your figures. Now, with the cultists, you get several cultists. Obviously, not just the one. You've got 3 of these guys. Is it 2 of these guys? Sorry, and it's 3 of these guys and 3 of these. And then, was it 5 or 6? Yeah, 6 of your cultists. Now, obviously, the Kickstarter does mix things up a bit, but that is the faction of Nyarlathotep. So let's move on to the next old one. Okay, so here we have wgah'nagl. So we've got 6 cultists holding their spell book, 2 ghouls. Then, for some reason, we have 4 mygos. Now, the mygos, with their thin legs, do tend to, if you're not careful, bend a little bit out of shape. A little bit of hot water, they soon bend back. So just watch out for that. Again, I've boxed it up with a gate and then the spell books with the little faction marker. So these are great figures. Let's give you a slightly closer look. In fact, let's try and get the camera to focus on them a bit better. Okay, so there's your cultist. They're all the same, they're just different colours. Then you've got the kind of ghouly character. And then the Mygo holding a brain, as of course they would. And as I say, I'm a little bit confused why these are part of the wgah'nagl faction, but, you know, sort of makes sense, I guess. So yeah, there you go. That is wgah'nagl, who's all about spreading out quickly. Nyarlathotep, he's sort of like tricks and flying and so on. Anyway, let's have a look at the King in Yellow next. Okay, well, the King in Yellow, they get their regular spell books, but they also get these desecration tokens, which are an interesting little mechanic whereby the King in Yellow spreads out and kind of infects the world. Now, again, of course, he has his cultists, so not really going to show you them, but he's got these really cool kind of cursed mummies, which are a nice little feature, and they make the King in Yellow stronger. And then... now, are these the Baikais? I really can't remember the names. Apologies, I will have to try and find out for you for one of the other videos. But yeah, that's a lovely figure. And the King in Yellow is an interesting character because, of course, he has two avatars. You have the King in Yellow himself and then Hasta. And, you know, these guys and the desecration tokens are your route to victory. Last but not least, we have Mighty Cthulhu himself, who of course has cultists, surprise, surprise. He also has these deep ones, which to me are a little bit disappointing. The good thing about these figures, though, is that they're nice and robust, so props on that front. And I like the heads, I just don't like the fact they're a little bit too frog-like and maybe not enough weird, twisted human-like for my taste. But, you know, they're really good figures. Just not quite what I imagine deep ones to look like. Now the Shoggoths, at first I wasn't sure if I particularly liked them, but they seem to work pretty well. And again, painted up, going to look really, really good. I have seen some people with painted sets and they are pretty amazing. Now some of these figures you can buy as resins from the original manufacturer, but you know, I'm quite happy with the plastic. And then these are star spawns, which again, I like everything from the waist up. I'm not so keen on the kind of little slug-like lower body, but that's just me. And I also felt these should be a little bit bigger maybe. But you know, the game's already big enough to be quite frank. And again, of course, your marker and your spell cards. Anyway, there you go. That's a quick look at that. Some extra bits. Obviously, the actual game tokens rather than 3D ones I showed you earlier. The little markers for the Doom track. Some nice but boring black dice with white pips. And then the rest of the actual gates, which you can, as I say, replace with the 3D ones. So anyway, that's a quick look at the components of the game. I'm going to see if I can maybe sort of set up a way of looking at the rest of the bits and also give you the correct names for all of these miniatures, because total brain fade when it came to remembering which each one was. Okay, now before I put the game contents back in the box, I thought I'd just show you scale. So this little cultist here is a 28mm figure, and one of the smallest figures of the old ones is the King in Yellow himself. So as you can see, he's pretty imposing. Then you've got wgah'nagl, Hasta just sort of off in the corner. Let's get these dark ones out the way. Oh dear, too many tentacles. So you see Hasta's a really imposing figure. Cthulhu, he's great as well. And then one of my favourite figures when you paint him up, actually looks great, is Nyarlathotep himself. So yeah, they are big, big figures, and on the game box it does actually give you an indication of just how big this guy is. I mean, he is a hefty figure. If we put the little cultist next to him, as you can see, He's very big. Now there is a reason I've taken these all out of the box, because of a little trick a friend of mine has to get everything back in this box relatively safely. Okay, so the trick my friend's come up with is you basically take the insert out the box, fill it up, then drop the main game box on top. Then when you flip it over, your figures are all nicely stored underneath, and then you can put your old ones away and everything goes away nice and neatly. Now you don't have to do that, but it can actually be a really good way of getting your figures nicely packed in here, because obviously they have different depths and you want to make sure your figures aren't getting too crushed when you put away your box. So let me just start packing in here, and then we'll try the old flipperoonie trick. So as you can see, I've started putting things in little side pockets, etc., just to get everything nicely in. I'm just going to lay out, for example, some figures there, and yeah, that's not going to quite work. The MyGo need to be moved into a new position, otherwise they're going to get all bent again. So let me take care of that, and then we'll do the flip. And there you go, mission accomplished. The minis are all underneath, they should be fairly secure. I've actually moved the King in Yellow in with Hasta, just because he's quite a large figure, I want to protect him. I've then got this little sheet that I drop on top and place everything back on top, and away we go. Okay, now when it comes to each faction, you've got your power. You've also got your various units. So you've got, for Great Cthulhu, Acolytes, Deep Ones, Shoggoth, Star Spawns, and Cthulhu himself, who, being immortal, when he dies, he comes back a little bit cheaper. And you've also got your spell books. So he just gets a spell book pretty much automatically. If you've got 5 faction spell books, you receive a spell book. If you kill people, you get spell books. Now, I did think there was an errata over this, but it would appear that this has not actually been fixed. And this is the one thing that drives my friend nuts about Cthulhu, that he can get these 2 spell books a little bit too easily. Control Gates in the Ocean and Wake Up Cthulhu, which you want to do anyway. So you can gain these spell books pretty quickly. Now, the actual spell book you gain is up to you. You just meet the requirement and gain the spell book. And these cards have actually been slightly updated for the new version of the game. You've then got the Crawling Chaos, or Nyarlathotep, Acolyte, Nightgaunt, Flying Polyp, Hunting Horrors, and Nyarlathotep himself. You can pay 4 power, you can pay 6 power. You can control 3 gates or have 12 power, 4 gates or 15 power, capture an enemy cultist, which, if I remember correctly, you do with your Nightgaunt, so I'm going to have to check that, and awaken Nyarlathotep. The yellow sign consists of Acolytes, Undead, Baikayi, King in Yellow, Hasta, awaken the King, place a desecration area, and there's a few of those depending on which area you control. You get it based on these symbols. As your action, select another player, they gain 3 doom points, you gain a sign, and awaken Hasta. So awaken King in Yellow, awaken Hasta, 2 separate old ones that you can awaken. The Black Goat, Shub-Niggurath, Acolyte, Ghoul, Fungi from Yuggoth, Dark Young, and Shub-Niggurath herself. Have units in 4 areas, units in 6 areas, units in 8 areas, so she wants to bomb burst. As your action for a round, eliminate 2 of your cultists. Yeah, good to worship. The Black Goat, she likes eating you. Share areas with all enemies, that's a little bit of a tricky one. And awaken Shub-Niggurath. So pretty cool setup. Pretty much all of them get 6 acolytes and a controlled gate, which is marked with your glyphs, which, as you can see, are here. And as I say, these have been slightly tweaked, so it's going to be interesting when we come to the Kickstarter extras to look at what's changed from this to the new one. So I just need to look at the rule book, the map, and give you my thoughts about the game, really. Now, the map for Cthulhu Wars is interesting. You've got two halves and they are double-sided. And for example, 5-player, or you can flip it over to 3-player. And for 4-player, you do a combination of the 3 and the 5. Now, this is one thing that didn't appeal to me when I first saw the game. The map sort of is ugly. But when you're actually playing the game, it makes a quite playable setup. And you've got various areas. So you've got the Arctic Ocean, the North Atlantic, the North Pacific, Indian Ocean, Australia, New Zealand, R'lyeh, or R'lyeh, depending how you want to pronounce it, Antarctica, etc., etc., all these different areas. Now, the Indian Ocean here links across to here, the North Pacific links across to here, so the map sort of wraps around on itself. And as I say, when you've not played the game, you see this map and it doesn't desperately appeal because it's not the prettiest. If I just flip over to the 3-player side, you can see Asia's this huge area, Africa's this huge area, whereas on the, if we flip back to the 5-player version, you know, Asia's divided up, Africa is also divided, etc. There are various symbols for different factions, and of course a lot of the extras that came with the Kickstarter will give you options to use some of those, because out of the box you only really use these big main factions, not these little glyphs. Anyway, let's have a quick skim of the rulebook. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the original version of the rulebook. It's on reasonable quality paper, but I think for a deluxe product he could have done a slightly better job. Having said that, however, the actual contents are nice and deluxe with lovely artwork and typeface, etc. Some nice quotes, and the rules are fairly easy to follow. It talks about the contents, the 4 factions, the map, the basics of how to play. It also talks about the extra gates a bit there, a little sneak peek of what the 3D gates look like compared to the little cardboard ones. Talks about the various phases, which I believe have actually changed in the new rulebook. He's slightly reordered the phases because it's a little bit complex. In the original version of the rules, it's like, this is how you play the game, except on the first turn where you play it slightly differently. It's not that big a deal to me, but it's going to be interesting to see how that mixes up the gameplay, and then goes through talking about various bits. It then talks about the actions you can take in your turn, and that's a nice interesting little bits that I quite like. Move in, battle in, and making gates, and quite a lot of descriptions. Talks about spell books, how to earn them, awakening your old one. It's then got some 2-player rules, which not brilliant, they're not bad. Talking about how to win, of course, some tips. So for example, if you're Cthulhu, how you should play the Crawling Chaos, Nyarlathotep, mglw'nafh, Hasta, and then some frequently asked questions, and yeah, nice little glossary. So pretty good rule book. Pretty happy with it. Now, one of the bits that you have a problem with this rule book is it did ask or leave people asking a few questions about a couple of weird circumstances where you might think, well, how do I find that? And as a rule book to read, to learn how to play, it's not bad. It's not so good, if I recall correctly, for actually flipping through to find an exact rule that you're looking for. Now, I made a big mistake the first time we played. I was playing as Nyarlathotep, and he was ridiculously powerful because I slightly misread a rule. So next time we played, of course, everyone piled on me and I died horribly, and didn't do so well. But yeah, I mean, have a good read of the rulebook before you play. Now, as I say, unfortunately for this rulebook, it's a little bit redundant, as we now have the Omega rulebook, which has supplanted this one, but it's still a pretty good rulebook. I'm not sure if you can still download this version off Sandy's website, Peterson Games, or Peterson Enterprises, or Entertainment, sorry, Peterson Entertainment. But yeah, nice little rulebook. My criticisms of the game when I first got it, was, ugly map. Some of the components felt a little bit cheap for what was a premium product. But, that all vanishes when you're playing. The components are perfectly adequate for playing. They are actually good quality. It's just that so much of the rest of the game is uber good quality that they just feel cheap in comparison. But, this paper actually is really nice paper when you actually got it in your hand. And the game, as I say, it sort of plays a little bit like Chaos in the Old World. I wouldn't go too far down that route myself. But yeah, it plays in a similar sort of way that you've got asymmetric powers and you've got limited actions. So, for example, I do an action, then the next player does an action, and it keeps going around until you run out of power, at which point you pass. Alternatively, you could just choose to pass for some reason, should you wish. But yeah, lots of nice examples with move in and stuff. I do like this game. I haven't played it as much as I would like. In fact, with Onslaught 2 arriving, it's probably going to get back to the table quite quickly. My only concern is storing the amount of stuff, which we're going to be looking at over the next few videos. If you like asymmetric powers, but you don't want to play a game that goes on for forever, this is a pretty good game to play. I forget the exact guidance now. I want to say about half an hour a player, so it plays pretty quick. It's good fun. There is a concern that Cthulhu, if they're not taken care of, can run away with the game a bit if you're not careful, because they can gain their spell books quite easily. But I've won as every single faction. It's an excellent game, and as I say, the only reason I haven't played it more is because I've been waiting for Onslaught 2 to turn up, and now that's here, I can see this hitting the table a lot more, and I enjoy it every time I play it, even when I lose. And it's always good to enjoy playing a game no matter what the outcome. Obviously winning is much sweeter, but there you go. So anyway, a quick kind of look at the components, a little bit of a light review. I'm personally of the opinion that it's a game well worth the money. It's not cheap, it is expensive. If you don't like the Cthulhu theme, well, maybe it's not the game for you. The miniatures are usable in other Cthulhu-based arenas. So if you're into Call of Cthulhu, Trail of Cthulhu, or any of those other RPGs that are out there, you might want to use figures if you're into using figures in your games. If you want to proxy figures in for other board games, feel free to. Now, component-wise, as I say, most of the components are pretty good quality, so no concerns there. As I say, the only downside is because they're such good quality stuff, it's heavy, it's big, and it's expensive. Anyway, I think that's enough waffling about that. I think what I'm going to do next is talk about the Onslaught 2 extras and then start tackling the expansions. So bear with me. I might need to go to have a little bit of counselling now after the insanity that is Cthulhu Wars.